Well, hello there. Today I am drinking another Proud Mary. It's a Kenyan. No, it's an Ethiopian. It's pretty light. It's very tea-like. It's very, very good. It's called Alternative. It's got some nice hints of citrus. I can really taste some lemon in it, which is really interesting. So today we're going to talk about the May reading that I did. Today was this month was another big reading month. I read another 9 books like I did in March. Again, it kind of is the exact same split, 5 fiction, 4 nonfiction. But 3 of those nonfiction are about AI, and that video is coming out next week, so expect to see that. So I'll start with the fiction books first and then move on to the nonfiction. And so the first book I read was Love in the Time of Cholera, which I did a video here about everything is tuberculosis and Love in the Time of the Cholera. I finished this like 2 days into May. It was almost an April read. I think this book was really fantastic. It was a nice change. I guess now it's probably considered a classic. And I mean, it came out in 1984 or 1985, written by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. You know, it follows, like I said in that episode, it starts out like near the end of the life of one of the characters. So like in their late 70s, early 80s, and then it jumps back in time to whenever 2 of the main characters met, and then kind of follows their divergent life up until you get back to that death again. And then so you can kind of understand whenever this guy, Florentino Arizo, says to Farmida Daza, I have been true to you for this entire time, you learn he's lying, he's a piece of shit, he's a horrible human being, and people have died because of his choices. And he completely gaslights her. I really recommend reading this book. I think it's going to challenge some people's expectation of what a romance is, and some people consider this a romantic book. I definitely don't. I think that Florentino Arizo is a horrible person, and I think that he's written incredibly well. The second book I read is Library of Mount Char. I just published my video about that with Piranesi. This was published in 2015 and written by Scott Hawkins. I was really taken aback by this book. I thought it was incredibly refreshing. It provided some really interesting characterization. The way the story was told was interesting. The issues that people had to overcome were pretty unique. And the way that it presented not magic, because the characters didn't call it they didn't think it was magic. They said it wasn't magic at all. But it very much, to someone who doesn't understand what these people are doing, it certainly would come across as magic. It's a very interesting look at the power of knowledge, the cost that people are willing to go towards for knowledge. Yeah, and it's really interesting. Just as the novel unfolds, what ends up happening and what the characters get into, and in their inner relational conflicts. And for Father, the man who trains them to be librarians in the library, he's a brutal person, and the way that comes across for each of the different characters is really interesting. The more you learn about the character, the more interesting he becomes. I really, really like this book. I think it's a fascinating interrogation of found family trauma, education systems, and the cost that people are willing to pay to get power and knowledge. The third book I read was also in that same video, is Piranesi by Susanna Clark, published in 2021. And if I thought that Library of Mount Char was phenomenal, this book is going to be an instant classic. It is so emotionally moving. It is also a study of people who are trying to who become cult leaders, who become incredibly powerful, who try and use power and knowledge to try and get more power, and the cost of that in a different way. Unlike with Library of Mount Char, where it's a kind of an analysis of university or general studying, this is like going and trying to understand the conflict between modernity and ancient knowledges, and the value, somewhat of the value of both, and that the beauty of knowledge in and of it, knowing knowledge in and of itself is a beautiful thing, regardless of whether you do anything with it. And I think that's great. I mean, I think in a lot of ways it really reflects what a lot of people who do BookTube are all about. They're not really about learning things for productivity. Like there's that whole productivity group of YouTube that are really about learning things to be more productive. People who are reading for BookTube, they might be reading to try and better themselves, but it is really just to enjoy what people are producing and enjoying art, and the way that art gets you to the sublime and emotionally changes you and how you look at your fellow humans. And I thought that was just so touching. I really recommend this book for everybody. It's fantastic. The last fiction book I read, which was also the last book I read, is called American War by Omar El Akkad, published in 2018. And this book really is a critique of American empire and American war by pushing back the lens of the wars that we've created for other people back on ourselves in a civil war. And since it takes place in the 2070s, sea levels have risen, climate change has come, oil wells are dried, and so it's really all the cost of all of that we have to contend with, that we caused as Americans, and in some ways the revenge that the world is getting on us, because there are aid organizations that are coming. The Red Crescent comes and provide blankets, and it indicates the ignorance of these aid organizations of what people on the ground actually need, and then the corruption of all the people that get the aid first, that sell it for exorbitant prices, that prevent what people need to getting to those people. And so when we hear about countries where there's starvation and we're sending all this aid, and we think, oh, well, they're not, why aren't people getting fed? And it's like, well, there's corruption, and we're enabling that corruption. And we know that this corruption is going on. We know that these people are doing it, but we're still enabling them. And that's exactly what's happening with an American war. There are the people from these other empires know that this corruption is going on. They know that limited supplies are getting to the people who need it the most, and they're okay with it, because they don't really want to bring this country back up to where it was. They want to keep it in the state that it is, especially since you learn very early in the book that there is a plague that's unleashed intentionally as a bioweapon that kill 110 million people. Based on what you learn throughout the book, you learn pretty quickly that it's not something that could have been developed within the United States at that time. So I think that it's a very well-written book. I think that there's a lot for Americans to reflect on in this, especially in the idea of cycles of violence and causes of he calls them homicide bombings, but they are what the same thing that happened in the Middle East, where they wear a pack of bombs and blow up a building. And this civil war lasted for 21 years. And I don't think that was an accident. I think that is a reflection on the Afghan war and all the things that America did in the Middle East and the broader Near East with Afghanistan. I really had to sit with this book afterwards. It was, the ending was emotionally hard because you know all the trauma that this one character goes through and the choices that she makes are rational. They're reasonable choices. And they're always presented to us in the West that someone who would do these things are irrational. But I think that's really far from the truth. It's really interesting. So moving on to the nonfiction books, I would say I would generally call this the month of AI, which I did somewhat intentionally. I had planned on reading the AI Con when that came out, and I knew that was coming out in May. I didn't realize the Empire of AI was also coming out in May. They came out like a week apart. And so I started with, I skipped a book there. So after reading Piranesi, I read The Dispossessed. I've heard gotten a lot of good feedback around that from people and some of the book communities I'm a part of. They say it's their favorite book. I think it's a fantastic book. It's really interesting. It's written in the same universe by Ursula K. Le Guin as The Left Hand of Darkness. It's published in 1974. So it's after The Left Hand of Darkness. So I don't think it reaches up to the pinnacle of best books. I really think personally that this book, I really enjoyed it. I thought Piranesi's was a better book, but they're also like wildly different books. This is about, like The Left Hand of Darkness, it is an interrogation of cultural norms, and this one really focuses on capitalism versus alternatives to capitalism. This one and in this society focuses on syndicalism, which is kind of like a very strong form of unions that drive the economy. And so you have a number of different unions for everything, and they work together in a form of community. It's not exactly communism because there's bartering that happens and people do get what they need, but everybody is in some sort of a union and they do work for what they need. And the society really, the way that this works is that a group of people went to a moon that were these separatists that went and made this radical new government. And one of them ended up coming back to the planet that they were originally from, was hoping to be an ambassador of these theories, these thoughts to try and help change the world that he left. It is a very interesting study on the impact of radicals and the corrupting influence capitalism has on them, and the motives of capitalists to try and corrupt any of these organizations to protect itself. In the world, there's a U.S. proxy and a Russian proxy, and there's even a Vietnam War proxy in it. I think it's really, really well written. I think the ideas are incredibly well presented. I think it's probably one of the best books that offers an alternative to capitalism that isn't just a post-scarcity society, because this is a scarcity society in terms of like there is dearth of resources on this moon, and there's only so many types of resources that can grow and thrive on this moon because the soil's poor, and there's all this dust and it's very arid. But despite that, and I think maybe because of it, the syndicalist aspect of things is more successful because that drives people to work more together rather than trying to exploit all the resources that would be there. So I think it's a really interesting book. And 50 years, even being 50 years old, I think that it is a very relevant book today, and I highly recommend it. So back to the nonfiction. The first nonfiction book I read is The Atlas of AI, written by Kate Crawford in 2022. And this book was written just before the explosion of ChatGPT. So this kind of occupies a liminal space where there is a group of technologists that are very aware of what AI is, and there's more and more people who are getting introduced to it through computer vision and some machine learning and tools like that. You know, the tools that are on Tesla and Tesla autonomous driving and things like that. And Kate Crawford really digs into the materialization of and the physicality of AI in terms of like the extractive requirements for lithium, for energy, and for some of the core technology, and then what's needed in the cloud in all the data centers and all the energy required for the data centers. And then it goes on to interrogate the algorithms that are used and the biases within it and the risks that are associated with that. And she references a couple authors that I've talked about on here, Safiya Noble and Ruha Benjamin, and some of their books. And it's a really great book. Unfortunately, with how quickly the state of the art for AI has been, it has been quickly kind of left behind and is kind of out of date, because AI has morphed from being a number of specific fields to generally being OpenAI and ChatGPT. And that's where the AI Con comes in, written by Alex Hanna and Emily M. Bender, published last month in May of 2025. This book, I would say, is the most directly critical of LLM technology and ChatGPT and chat tools, the way that the technology works. And in some ways, it feels like a screed against it. They criticize and really just show that this technology is an empty technology, that the people who think that we're on the verge of some sort of sentience are just totally delusional, and that they've lost touch with reality, that these technologies are not going to be particularly useful, that they are not particularly good at what they're supposed to do. They are pure statistical models. They are glorified version of autocorrect and of T9, where it predicts predictive text on your phone. It just expands that from one word to multiple words and sentences. So they call it a stochastic parrot, because it just parrots back all the words that have been fed into it. It calls it a synthetic text extrusion machine. And this book is just dripping with disdain for users of the technology, what people think the technology is going to be doing, the leaders who are adapting it to take over and replace employees. There's such disdain and disgust for the people who are doing that. I kind of love it. It was also a harder book to read, I felt, than some of the other ones. I felt that in a lot of ways that there was just a hammering of this idea of synthetic text that just made it feel angry in a way that made it less interesting to read over time. As I got through it, I got fatigued by the way the book was written. I thought that the policy recommendations that they included in the end were very good. I really thought that they had some really good ideas there. But I was so fatigued by the end of the book that I just didn't really want to read them, because it just felt very angry. So I think that of the 3 AI books I read, The Empire of AI, written by Karen Howell, published a week before Hanna and Bender's book in May of 2025, was a better book for lay people to read, I think. And I would certainly consider myself more of a lay person whenever it comes to AI technology. I'm in the technology space, but I'm not in AI. And I think that this book, they occupy different spaces. Like, one is I would say, an academic critical analysis of the technology, and in Empire of AI is a critical analysis of the business of OpenAI. And I think that it falls more in the realm of Skunkworks or Dealers of Lightning or the Idea Factory, where they're kind of like a history of those companies. And through that lens, they, of course, study the technology that those companies produce. And because Karen Hao is a journalist first, rather than an academic first, she's writing to explain in ways that I think complement really well the criticisms of AI Con. I think that for most people, it would be easier to read the Empire of AI first, then read the AI Con, because you have a much better grasp of what the technology is, where people's headspace are, the doomer boomer arguments, the people who think that AI is going to become Skynet soon, which is the doomer group. And then you have the boomer group who think that it's going to be so positive for technology that we have to invest in it, that it's an imperative. And that's where the synthetic text comes in to criticize these books, or these groups, as saying this is absurd. We're never going to have this boomer side or doomer side. From a general survey of the technology, I think that Karen Hao's book does a better job kind of just explaining what all the different technologies that OpenAI has gone through, and then its kind of general pivots. And I think that it also highlights the risks to the company, because the company is incredibly unstable and is, I think, in a very precarious position. Karen Hao wrote this book incredibly well, and it feels like it builds on Kate Crawford's work, and it builds on Hao's own work and a variety of other sources. If you're going to read any of these three books, I would recommend The Empire of AI, because one, I like the style, and it's also just the most accessible. But they're all fantastic reads. And the last nonfiction book I read is A Mouthful of a Book. One Day, Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This, by Omar El Akkad, same guy who wrote the American War. This was published in February of 2025. This book is phenomenal. I loved this book. It was the hardest book I've read in a long time. It exposes the core of American empire for the empty, moral, bankrupt empire it is. It condemns the Democratic Party, both in terms of what Joe Biden did, what Kamala Harris did. It condemns the party leaders that were walking past the protesters for the Palestinian, the God. So let me just take a step back. This is talking about the genocide in Gaza, and it is framing it and using the term, one day everyone will have always been against this, in a way of saying that how everybody is now against the Holocaust, because Americans weren't entirely against the Holocaust. People didn't want Jews to come to the U.S. during the Holocaust. People knew that bad things were happening to the Jews. They knew they were being put into ghettos. They didn't know that they were necessarily going to gas chambers, but they knew that bad things were happening to them, and the U.S. instituted blocks and limitations to how many people could come over. Einstein came over because of he came over on a Genius Grant, not because he came over as a Jewish refugee. And that's what Akkad is arguing here, is that in the same way now everyone has always been against the Holocaust, everyone is going to always have been against the genocide in Gaza. And it is a genocide. And we need to recognize that. And we need to recognize that the American government, according to Israelis, could have ended this bombing, this genocide, at any time that it wanted to. Saying that they were working towards a ceasefire was dishonest and just trying to placate the left. Joe Biden wanted this to happen. He was supportive of it. He enabled it. He was selling bombs. There were many different bills that were provided to fund Israeli genocide. And that's what this book is about. And I think it really makes Americans look at what we're doing. And in the same way that American war makes us look at what the Afghan war was and the Iraqi war, this is making us look at what this genocide is and what we're doing to support it. It's not an easy thing to hear. I think all Americans need to read it, though. On that cheery note, I plan to make a video about the American war, and everyone will have always been against, one day everyone will have always been against this, and the dispossessed as well. So keep an eye out for those. Subscribe if you're interested in those. I would love to hear some comments down below about some other books that you'd be interested in me reading about and writing about. I really appreciate your time. I thank you so much for watching. It really means a lot, and I really hope you have a good one. Thank you.